I'm Jason Paul.
And I'm Audrey Can, and we represent Unit 1 from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and our teacher is Ms. Megan Boimann-Hennies.
Great. Thank you so much. So this is Unit 1, and we're going to be addressing question 3, and I'll read all of Unit 1 and then all of question 3. So Unit 1, what are the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system? And this is question 3. In John Locke's second treatise of government, he asked this question: if man in the state of nature be so free, as has been said, if he be absolute lord of his own person and possessions, equal to the greatest and subject to nobody, why will he part with his freedom? How did Locke answer this question? Do you agree or disagree with Locke's answers? Why or why not? Explain why both John Locke and Thomas Jefferson claimed that there was a natural law in a state of nature. Do you agree or disagree with their position? Explain your position. What did Locke mean by a social contract? Why did he think it necessary? And what obligations does it place on the individual? Timer, you may begin.
Constitutional law scholar Alan Dershowitz stated, "The people themselves, or the governed, have decided to entrench in our governing documents certain fundamental liberties and limitations, which they designate as rights, rather than mere preferences." This panel agrees with Locke's assertions that in order to protect individual freedoms, the people must enter into a government to ensure a common strength and ideal that all people can share and use to protect their rights.
Freedom is the power to act, speak, or think without hindrance or restraint. Locke wrote that in a state of nature, a man is free and has control over his own person and possessions, unhindered by others' infringement. In a state of nature, people are purely attempting to protect their own individual rights, which means they may have unintentionally infringed upon someone else's rights in the process. Referenced in Chapter 8 of the Second Treatise of Government, in response, Locke states that man would part with his freedoms in order to protect themselves, as the enjoyment of freedom is uncertain and constantly exposed to the invasion of others.
Locke specifically focuses on the idea of property, as it is the easiest for others to infringe upon. His philosophies applied to the founding of America and the creation of a new nation in order to protect individual liberties that were infringed upon by the British monarchy by way of salutary neglect, virtual representation, and the intolerable acts. Regarding the act of leaving a state of nature in order to ensure liberties, Locke affirmed that no man can be put out of this estate and subjected to the political power of another without his own consent. According to the theory of a social contract, people will consent to their government, removing their ability to act individually to defend personal interests, as long as their rights were protected by the government.
The framers alluded to the governmental expectations within the preamble of the Constitution by saying that the government should establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. Both the government and the citizens agreed to uphold their side of the contract with Article 4, Section 4, and Article 7, respectively.
In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson listed two self-evident truths: the equality of all men and their endowment of inalienable rights. For Jefferson, the initial laws of nature obtained when a man is in the state of nature are roughly the same as the laws obtained in a civil society. Jefferson believed that the government must follow natural law manifested in itself in the citation of rights to the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which parallels Locke's ideas emphasized in the Second Treatise of Government. In a letter, Jefferson wrote, "Rights were understood as claims, which a person has treated in certain ways by others, to be permitted to do certain things without interference, to engage in certain activities, and to enter into certain relations around him."
According to Locke, those who are united into one body have a common established law and judicature to appeal to. The amendment process in Article 5 of the Constitution is an opportunity for future legislators and citizens to repair small parts of their government if they see it unfit, rather than dismantling the entire system. Throughout American history, we can see examples of this social contract being upheld, as well as being placed under question. For example, in the landmark case Brown v. Board of Education, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution gave the Supreme Court the right to uphold the social contract for discriminated minority groups through their ability to determine the outcome of cases on a federal level. The social contract was challenged in order to expand protections of natural rights for a greater quantity of Americans.
In a speech on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, former President John F. Kennedy voices that, in giving rights to others which belong to them, we give rights to ourselves and to our country. Thank you. We are now ready for your follow-up questions.
Great. So my colleagues and I will have some follow-up questions, and I'll begin. Could you briefly explain the key and differing views of human nature and government held by Thomas Hobbes and our founders?
Thomas Hobbes believed that in the state of nature, men would find themselves in chaos. But in government, men would find themselves to be orderly and conducted.
And how about contrast to the founders?
So the founders believed that because they were already in the colonies, that they were already confined into a government, and that letting go of the British government could send them into a form of chaos without a centralized government.
However, in the creation of the Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution, we can see that there were differing opinions about this, as the Federalists believed that the United States should have a strong federal government, while the Anti-Federalists feared that this government could become tyrannical and inhibit the rights that they believed that they should have.
Hobbes' idea of behavior of men in a state of nature is more reflective of what he saw during the English Civil War, and the founders' beliefs were more reflective of their personal experiences during the colonial period, which was a little bit chaotic in terms of the revolution, but less so than anything that had been seen during the English Civil War. And these experiences were more categorized in their explanations of possessions of natural rights and their ability to act with enlightened self-interest, as cited by Alexis de Tocqueville.
Can you break a law that you consider to be unconstitutional without violating a social contract?
Yes. Within the social contract, we can see that different laws are made. So, being such, you can have a law and you can have a right. Now, sometimes the law says you cannot do that right, but in other ways, if you do that right, you cannot. It's also part of the law.
Throughout American history, we've seen examples of civil disobedience. If you look at Henry David Thoreau and his not paying taxes and then subsequently being thrown in jail, they realize that they're doing something that is not in accordance with the laws of our country, but they're doing so out of a desire to protest and a desire to voice their opinion in a way that's may not be lawful.
In addition to my colleague's point, another example would be a letter from a Birmingham jail by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in which he stated that while he knew what he was doing was against the law, he believed that it was best for the people and minorities that he was attempting to defend.
So tying it back to your question about the social contract, it is upholding their social contract because the people, as the government has a duty to protect the rights of their citizens, the citizens have a right to assert their rights and assert their place in the country and be responsible citizens.
Okay, let's stop there. What are the sources of natural law?
One of the main sources of natural law is, as stated by Thomas Aquinas, is that all individuals are, in a state of nature, are seeking good, and they have certain ideas of what they need to do to achieve that good. However, they are often insecure by themselves, so they will form a group to feel more secure.
Thomas Jefferson drew on John Locke's ideas about government by consent and the right to rebellion. What did Thomas Hobbes think about the right to rebellion against kings?
He believed in a more absolutist form of government, so the people should choose their king and then stick by the king for the rest of that particular king's life. He believed that people should have the power to make the decision in determining who their king was, but after they've made their decision, they should deal with it, essentially.
In what way is the Constitution an example of a social contract?
In Article 5 of the Constitution, we can see the details of the amendment process, which is a way for constituents and citizens to attempt to make changes within the government without having to dismantle the entire thing.
we can also see that through voting, people are able to participate within the government, which is a major part of the social contract. This can be seen through Article 15, Amendment 15, Amendment 19, and Amendment 26, establishing voter rights for people.
What is the difference between the rights that we have in society versus the rights we possess in the state of nature? Is there a difference?
I believe it is my assertion that the rights in nature are similar to rights in the society, but they can differ based upon which society you are in.
Locke had the fundamental rights in a state of nature as life, liberty, and property, and I would assert that these ideas are reflected within the Constitution, specifically in the Bill of Rights.
Thomas Hobbes preferred the absolute power of monarchs. John Locke preferred the constitutionally limited authority of Parliament. What did the founders draw from Hobbes and Locke to shape our constitutionalism?
If you look at Anti-Federalist, specifically in Brutus 1, they...
Oh. It was a good question, and it was a really good answer, but we just weren't able to get there. So, first of all, I want to thank you and your teacher and any parents that are in the room. This is difficult material. I say it to all groups. You should be congratulated on not only getting to the national finals, but also doing a solid job, because this is material that in a lot of instances, I say to almost all the groups, that you won't get until you're in college, and you probably feel like you have a big leg up on the students that aren't in this program. I thought that the way in which you use various quotes from Alan Dershowitz and Second Treatise in Government, as well as some good historical examples. I liked how you were able to use Brown v. Board of Ed and the comments from JFK from the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation to kind of help make your points. This is a very thorny question. It's a philosophically thorny question, but I liked how the examples you gave, and I in particular liked how you were able to insert some historical examples in there too. I thought you did a very nice job with the question that I had about the lessons that Locke, that Hobbes and Locke drew from their experiences. And in particular, again, you kind of use history again, and you actually preempted another question I had when you made reference to the English Civil War. My only suggestion is that when you're listing the things that the framers drew from their colonial experience, as you mentioned the Articles of Confederation, first Constitution, and then the U.S. Constitution. One of the intermediary steps was that the states all developed state constitutions, which are older than the U.S. Constitution. So they were doing intermediary steps to make sure that they weren't sort of stuck in this state of nature in between rebelling from England and having their own formal constitution. And I thought you did a nice job with the reference to Thomas Aquinas, and as well as some other historical examples you used about Thoreau and protest and a letter from Birmingham jail. So you had a solid performance this afternoon. You should be happy.
Thank you.
You pretty much covered everything that I was going to say. I really liked your discussion, particularly when you talked about Hobbes and talked about his experience with the English Civil War and sort of compare and contrast that with the founders of the American Revolution. And I also with your discussion of natural law, your discussion of Aquinas, right? I think you brought that up. So.
Yeah, it's hard to go last because they're right about what they said. So let me offer some criticisms, if I could. The use of Aquinas was great, but there is a dichotomy that develops in the concept of natural law that's much more in the ancients, and you can argue where that breaks, but the ancients, this comes from the divine, and the more modern, quote unquote, modern sense would be that no, it's a little more secular in nature. Maybe explain that out, the conflict between reason and revelation you want to think of it in that sense. I'd like to see more on that, to be honest with you. The idea of whether or not you violate the social contract if you deem a law unconstitutional, I think the use of letter from Birmingham jail is I think it's our first time today. In fact, very, very good use actually. As a historian, the amount of history you guys used, I deeply appreciate. Sometimes we're way up here in the theoretical, and I like being down here in the reality, the world of reality. So I applaud you on that. I do think perhaps exploring a little bit more than in your talk, you referenced Kennedy's remarks. But is there a difference between giving rights and possessing natural rights? Kennedy's remarks seem to imply that they're giving rights. So what's the difference there? And I think there's a huge difference, and maybe explore that to show that dichotomy. But having said all that, I really enjoyed the use of history, and it's good to see fellow Kentuckians too. So yeah, thank you all.